Welcome to our 9th anniversary Portal 47 open house. I cannot believe it has been 9 years since I created this uh, pioneering package of peaks backstage at Star Trek, the backstage Star Trek. All the Star Trek you had no idea about. But like any good open house, it's a special night, right? We open the portal doors and we show it all off with free samples. First, we had an Ask Dr. Trek roundtable, basically an open mic night for the fans, this time with door prizes. And then a sample of our guest night, our telebriefing. But not just any guests. So no, for open house, we get the cream of the crop. The first year we had, rest his soul, we had the director of the very first Star Trek pilot, The Cage, Robert Butler. And since then, we've had, oh my gosh, look at this. Look, Mike Westmore, David Livingston, David Carson, René Echevaria, Robert Hewitt Wolfe, Ira Steven Behr, Mike McMahan, Nick Meyer, and this year, yes, the Hagemans, Dan and Kevin, co-creators and the co-showrunners of Prodigy. Now we're all standing around, they like us, waiting to see which way the industry winds are blowing and what in the world the streaming gods at Netflix are going to say about a third season of Prodigy. They're waiting just like we all are. We also talk tonight, well, how Prodigy comes together as a format and how it comes together as an animated series. All those names in the credits, all of that. And yes, we'll get into some favorite bits and pieces. I've got some personal questions I want to ask. But it's a great look at the show and the industry and just exactly what might be at stake as we think about this renewal and the greater Star Trek picture. Okay, enough of that. Here's Dan and Kevin. First of all, thank you guys for being here. This is awesome.
Thank you very much for inviting us. We're happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, obviously, the open house guest is always, I have to say, I always have backstage people, no actors. They get enough attention. It's fine. I love them.
We got backstage faces, so we're good.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got a face just made for backstage. But anyway, but what I was going to say was we were talking about the Turkish Star Trek corner of the Nickelodeons, and I was wondering, and then I saw later on, I think some of the news pieces, it's awesome that I know it was Nickelodeon, but still, it's awesome that the first piece of something to actually make it funded and go in a foreign theme park again is Prodigy.
It was fun. It was I think a year and a half ago or almost 2 years ago, they came to us and were mentioning that they wanted to do this, and it was great. I mean, I think Nickelodeon when they presented like a Nickelodeon land and you could pick 3 different properties, the owners were looking at everything and they're like, we really want Star Trek to be one of them. So that was great.
And that was
we have a running thing where we have a couple things in theme parks. Kevin, I don't know if you got the brass ring there in your office, but
I don't. It's
Kevin and I are kind of a big deal in foreign things. I think we had a Ninjago theme park puppet show in Thailand that we won. They call it the brass ring, and the brass
ring is like the Oscar for theme park entertainment.
For carnies.
It's for carnies.
And this is from Troll Hunters, or this is from what?
No, this was Ninjago.
Lego Ninjago, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
It was fun.
I think there's like a Hotel Transylvania thing, like in Transylvania. I don't know.
Yeah, we helped advise on the Prodigy ride, and we even got to see a screening of it in a theater.
Oh, very cool.
5 months.
Yeah, it's like a 4D ride. So like you get in and the seats move and you smell stuff and the bubbles are coming out your face and you got Dal, you got Gwen, you got Murph, you got Rock.
It's fun. They recorded the actual actors, so it's
fun. Good. It sounds like a next generation. I don't mean TNG. I mean it sounds like a next generation, little letters, of the Borg ride, the second ride at Vegas when they tried to make it 4D and have. You had a sensation of water and something whizzing by your head and all that kind of gosh.
I think the line is actually the cooler part of it. Because like when you walk in, there's like little terrariums of little alien creatures. And I mean, Rock plays a big part. It's all about taking care of our alien life out there. It's an adorable ride. It's a ride that everyone can enjoy, but I definitely feel like it's more on the kids side.
So when tourism to Turkey spikes 47% next year, we can all credit Prodigy. Is that
Yep.
what? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
47. Yes.
From the States over to, yeah. Well, let me start. I always like to start a little bit, not, your life in 20 words, but yeah, your life in 20. And I know Troll Hunters, but where did you guys grow up and how did you wind up, in animation and much less on Star Trek's doorstep? But we can get to that in a second. But just,
Well, we grew up in Oregon. For those who don't know, I swear some people still don't know. We are brothers. Some people literally will do meetings and like, how did you guys meet? And how did you start writing together? I'm like, well, let me tell you a story. So we grew up in Oregon, and I think Dan and I were just creative. We loved movies. It was raining a lot, so you couldn't play outside. And our dad had a video camera, and there we go. We started filming a lot of things in the house. I would subject Dan into acting in things. I would tend to be the director, and yeah, that's how we started to enjoy making stuff. And then it just kept every step of the way. I'd go to film school, and we'd start doing more elaborate short films and things. And
I don't think our careers have ever gone to a place where we've wanted them to go. Because I remember early on, it was like we're going to do giant like Spielbergian live action movies, and then all of a sudden it's like there was the writer's strike of 2007. And now we're doing Hotel Transylvania, and then we're like, and we always kind of came into going like snooty patootie, or like I don't know, or we're auteur filmmakers. We're not into animation, but then. And then came around Ninjago, the animated show. We're like, okay, I guess we'll do this. But I think we were always
Lego
very,
movie and Lego
what's
movie
that? The
too.
Lego movie. But
So
we
yeah.
were always very dubious of it. And we were very like, we felt like that wasn't us. But then the more we did it, the more we loved it. Same thing with Star Trek. Like when they first came to us with Star Trek, we're like, I don't know if we're the right people for that. But then getting involved in it, it's like the best things in our life have all been things that we've done that we didn't originally think we wanted to do.
kind of backed into it.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
what um what was what was it about Star? Not that Star, like it's obviously a franchise, it's been around for ages and it was in the middle of a renaissance. But what was it when you first said, we're not really Star Trek guys? Where did that come from?
Oh, it was absolute fear. It was the fear of I grew up, Dan too. The Mostly grew up on the original films, with Kirk and Spock. Wrath of Khan was our first Star Trek film experience. So I loved the films especially, and it was just frightening. It was just frightening to go. I did not want to be the guy to ruin Star Trek, right?
Mhm.
It's like
Usually,
imposter, yeah, it's imposter syndrome. You feel like you're presented this opportunity. You're like, oh no, the fans love Star Trek, and they're going to judge our love is not as strong as theirs, and they'll see right through it, and we'll fail. It's like that's when you start. And I think I was also very afraid of writing bridge speak, like we don't like we're not military people. We wouldn't know how to write that. And it wasn't until we go, well, what if we tell an emotional forward story about characters who don't pretend to know anything about Star Trek? It gave us like a security blanket of like seeing it through their eyes. And it allowed us to be able to kind of like from afar take a second look at Star Trek and going, what are the things that we loved about Star Trek that we feel like translates to someone who's never seen Star Trek? And at the same time, I think resonates with people who do watch Star Trek.
Well, I know and again, I'm trying not to make this like every other like regular interview you've done because those either focus on what's coming up and what just happened or whatever. But I did want to get into some roots. So, who exactly was it? Alex? I mean, did they probably interviewed other people? I'm guessing, but whatever it was that made you stick with them, or was it you pushing when you got you started off a little reluctantly, but I'm just wondering who gave the march, like what you just said, like why don't
yeah.
we do the security blanket of kids so we don't, was that yours? Was that anything? What did they give you and what did you initially come up with on your own?
They came to us. I don't know, like if they went to other writers or they heard other takes, but I
Alex
just
wasn't in
know.
the room originally. It was Heather Caden and
And
Aaron
Heather Caden
Byers.
had young children, and they were huge fans of Ninjago. and she had seen Ninjago and thought,
Ah.
these guys do really great, smart entertainment that kids can enjoy. And so she brought us in, and really all they had was, we want to find and create an on-ramp into Star Trek. Star Trek, there's so many shows now, the lore is so deep, it could be intimidating. And like, if you're a brand new viewer or a kid, how do you start falling in love with Star Trek? And so that was what they came to us with, and then then we came up with the concept.
Well, I think there's also a little bit of like, well, we weren't at that time in our careers, we had done Troll Hunters, and we keep trying to age up. It's like Lego is Ninjago is one thing, but we still feel like better writing can be done that can kind of cross generations, and sometimes the Lego stuff looks a little young. And so I think we were a little bit worried when they said, well, we really like you from Ninjago. We go, well, we want to take that and kind of elevate it even more so. A little bit like what we did with Troll Hunters, and even more so then. And I think, yeah, I think when they first came to us, they're thinking, yeah, let's just do a kid show. And I think we were the ones that are like, no, I think it can be more than just a kid show. It could be a show that, like, as Kevin was saying, can work for your everyday, not even a Star Trek fan, a fan of sci-fi, a fan of space stuff that has not gotten into Star Trek for whatever reason. Because it is intimidating, because it feels like you have to watch some 400 episodes to feel like a Star Trek, and
Hey, let
that's a
me
lot.
also, yeah, and let me also add, when you're a writer in Hollywood, I don't know what the ratio is, Dan, but like 80% of stuff we've written has never been produced. And so when you look at what we've done, like Dan was saying, aging up, we're aging up to like Ninjago was meant for younger kids, and so, which was fun and a blast. But we're like, we've spent over 20 years writing live action, you know, comedies, PG-13 films, rated R films for adults. So there's that in us, that's wanting to, like, not just write for children, but for the adult as well.
We want to write for ourselves. We want to make sure that whatever we're writing that we want, we would watch it the first day it came out.
And I would fall in love. Like, what's that opening scene that's going to make me fall in love with this character?
Yeah. Well, I just go back to the classic. It took a while. When you're a kid, you don't notice it, but everything from Wizard of Oz to the classic, Looney Tunes, to Bugs and Daffy. It's like you see it as one way as a kid, and in original Star Trek too, even.
Mhm.
I heard someone say, "Why do we need a Star Trek for kids?" I was only 8 when I started watching Kirk and Spock and McCoy. But
Yeah.
okay, but it's slightly different world now.
Yeah.
But you watch those classics where you do get it, or you're watching with your kids, and the kids are taking it at one level, and the adults are going, "Huh, good, good pun, good joke. Ooh, oh, that's a caricature. That's a reference to,
And sometimes that works with an older, let's say, with the original series. Some children, yeah, will go, oh, they'll latch onto it. There's also children, like my children, when they see an older show like that, they're like,
That's
it's a
dusty.
different time. They're not used to
yeah,
watching sets and foam props, like,
yeah,
And then
where
also with,
back
like,
then that
in
was more
terms of, can you
exciting for
just
us.
turn on any Star Trek? Like, you look at the second episodes of The Next Generation, I think The Naked Now, and you're like, as a parent, you'd be like, I don't know if I want to go deep dive right into that right away.
right, right. No, it's perfect for that. Well, let me share just a couple of things to spur us along here, because for one thing, I have to show your official title card. So there we go tonight.
Oh,
Um,
Oh, wow.
get out of my way here.
Let's just sit on that for a while and just enjoy it.
My Zoom is in the way. I'm trying to move it.
zoom
Okay.
in.
So boom. So let me
Zoom in on my brother's nose. Yeah.
so this is like the Netflix title. This is where we are now. But let me put this up because I want to get to the characters later on. But so you had a basic notion. Let's have kids that are learning that they're not dyed in the wool, born and bred Starfleet, and as a security blanket. But that's still a million different choices. Can you, like, just roughly go down the main cast here and kind of,
Well,
like,
also, so first of all, why are they youth? For us, there's an aspirational wish fulfillment, right? We love this thing that we call the twilight of childhood. And for us, like, it was watching the Goonies, and it's the kids on the last great adventure before adulthood set in. And we
It's
feel like
basically
that's,
like kids learning tough lessons about life, that it's not all black and white, that it's super gray. and
And
that
that's
growing
a
up is tough, but then it kind of
yeah,
forms you that family of that, the camaraderie.
found family and stuff. And so that's like
Yeah.
for us, that's a sweet spot that if you do it well, kids enjoy the wish fulfillment, and then adults, there's something nostalgic in there, reminding you when you were young on that last great adventure with your friends.
And I think the first thing when we look at the lineup before we even go anybody, we go like we did this for Ninjago, where why is each ninja different? Well, this one is the Earth Ninja. This one is you got to figure out very,
Right.
very clear roles for each person. And then also you think about like on the toy shelf, how are they gonna, unfortunately, Playmates didn't put too big of a toy footprint on this, but it's like when you're looking at them, we're like, well, what if you had a character who would light up? And that was Zero. And they were like, what if you had like a translucent a gal with this
Squishy.
awesome, amazing weapon that could turn into anything she wanted? That's Gwen.
Mm-hmm.
What if you have this giant hulking brute, but it's a little girl? That's Rock. We wanted to make sure that each like 'cause I kind of feel like with when I look at like the next generation action figures, they're all kind of, I mean, they all kind of look the
Hmm.
same a little
They
bit. They
look the
don't,
same. They're
unless you
all
really
wearing the
know what
same
it is.
uniform. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Jenkem was the one with the tech mitt. We were always thinking of like what makes each one cool to have as a toy.
Mm.
And that just helps us kind of going, and this isn't about like selling your soul for toys. It's about finding the kid in ourselves and going, oh,
Hmm.
that'd be cool. That'd be super fun. What if there was like a
Hey,
little slimy blobby thing?
I am all for Star Trek selling itself for toys again because there were a time in the 90s and the aughts that the inside Trek people, business people, and a lot of us watching the franchise were like worried that, Trekkie parents couldn't have kids fast enough to replace the lost generation that it wasn't a contest. We were kind of losing it to every other major franchise. And then we had the fallow years. So, I'm all for having toys.
Yeah.
I am.
I can I call out? Yeah, Mark had a great question about what of the main character designs changed the most from the initial conception.
Yes, that's what I
And
wanted to get to. Yeah.
I think Dan, you would agree it was Murph, right? Dan, would you
No,
say the same?
Zero. Well, both we can talk
You're right. Zero.
separately.
Okay, I'll talk about Murph. You talk about Zero. Murph, we wanted to be this ugly like thing, like the
Bulldog.
most ugliest, funniest, ugliest
Like
pet.
worse. Like it was ugly,
Mhm.
but it was cute in its ugliness. Like a walrus was like,
Yeah.
woo.
And we went through so many iterations of it, and we could never find it until finally one of our producers, Heather Caden,
Other
was like,
created.
she's like, why don't you just make it cute? And I'm like, in your head, I didn't want some stupid looking cute thing
We
to
were
play.
fighting against it. We didn't want to make
Yeah.
Yeah.
something
But
that.
we wanted, when we saw this design, we're like, that's adorable. And that's not a cheesy cute, not a like an animated show for 4-year-olds cute, but this is
Right.
actually a
And
cute.
it's not Tribbles 2.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
And then
Well, what?
Zero
Yeah.
was we had our lineup, and originally Zero looked like a almost like an underwater vessel, like a big but bipedal, like with arms and legs. And Zero's light could travel from different parts of their humanoid shape. And Kurtzman says, I love them all except for this character. It looks too much like C3PO. And you're like, okay, we can't have a character
Well, he
look
looked
like.
like a robot, or not they looked like a robot. And we're like, you're right. Like, I don't want just people who don't know anything about a show. And you're like, oh, there's the robot.
Well, you can still, from like a glance, you can still think Zero's the robot. But yeah, that's what like. What if I think it was Alex's idea? What if we make like a floating orb that like legs would come in and out, and we're like, that's cool.
Hmm.
I'm not sure what Larry's doing. I think it.
He's taking selfies.
I'm doing the screen cap. Yeah. Commemorating this. Well, number one, let me go back to Murph because this is the one. By the way, I have one of those rare New York Comic Con Murphs that are now, which
I
I
sold
thought
the
this,
last one. They're gone now.
I was going to say what? Well, we can talk about that a little later, maybe the whole merchandise disappointment here, but
Yeah.
missteps. But about Murph, so the cute Murph that we start off with, then we find out that's just his youngling side, and then he's going to mature and like almost like butterfly inchworm into butterfly or whatever, cocooning
Mhm.
or whatever. Was that part of the thing from the beginning, or was that like a later idea to not have him be in the cute gloppy form all the way through and have him be more, bipedal?
Yeah, when we started to explore the character, we didn't want just the pet, the goofy pet on the ship. We're like,
Yeah.
Murph is a character. What's Murph's story? What's going to happen to Murph? And we just fell in love with this idea that Murph was going to go through a metamorphosis, and yeah, that's our hope. If ever the show continues or any sort of other further iterations, I want to grow up with these characters. I want Rock Talk. I want to use our same voice actress, Riley, and she'll probably be a teenager, and we're gonna have to make Rock more of a teenager now, right? And I want Murph to grow up too. So.
I think it was interesting though too. It's like when the first season came out, and I think everyone who was there at the time, there was a lot of Murph. Like a lot of people were like, "Oh my gosh, Murph is the cutest thing." Like, and I think at that time in the room, we had already gone into like the bipedal version. We're like, "Oh my gosh, did we make a mistake?" Because we were ahead of the
People love Murph so much, yeah.
people love like, "Oh my
Yeah.
goodness!" But at the same time, though, the slugging Murph created animation problems too, though. Like they didn't move Murph didn't move quite that. What wasn't easily like they were just kind of like a solid form, kind of moving back and forth. So that was something we wanted to do.
Mm. That's well, I know Cadet Alice took some time to get over the change, but she's okay with it now. Well, the other layer here is the original. I say the original. They're all original characters, but the fact that and I guess Gwen is a Val Nakot. That's plot driven. That's what she is, and the fact that we finally found out Dahl is basically an augment. He's a Mulligan stew. Everybody else is an interesting choice to me. You've got a legacy Tellarite. You've got a legacy Medusan, and then finally find out that he's a melanoid slime worm, which was a throwaway, reference in one show. And then Rock is a bricker, which I'm shocked is out of a novel. So I'm just curious. Normally it's like, don't touch the novels because then we have to pay the author rights. I'm just curious about the decisions when you came down to who, and I guess Dal and Gwen are the kind of the leads. And I'm leaving Janeway out for now, but Dal and Gwen are the leads. So that was I mean, I was just curious about the decision to go Tellarite and Medusa and go Legacy.
Imagine sitting there, imagine going, okay, I get to create a new show and I get to have a cast of characters, right? And there's so many choices.
I remember,
yeah,
when we were kind of deep diving into Star Trek, and we're like the four founding species. One was a Tellarite, which is like a cantankerous, always disagreeable character. I'm like, I don't remember many Tellarites from the episodes I had watched, and I was shocked at how little they were used.
Thank you.
And yeah, and Tellarites were like perfect for like this would be a horrible person on a bridge, but so much great comedy of exactly what we wanted to do.
Let me just add on that it was comedy and conflict, right? So if we're going to have our engineer, who would be the worst species ever to be their engineer, right? Zero, the Medusan, going to become our medical officer. We always knew that we wanted Zero to become that. So who would be the worst doctor? And we're like, a character who doesn't even have a physical body. They're not even biological. They don't even know, right? And then we thought that's interesting too.
Even the Doctor has magnetic. He can be technologically, have contact.
Yeah.
Yes,
but a Medusan is formless.
Just a very similar type of thing. Like, not a human.
But also, we love the idea of. I mean, for me, I felt like Star Trek really opened my mind when I was younger on what aliens could be. Much more so than Star Wars. And so we're like, well, let's do an alien. And then when we were looking into all the great imaginative aliens that have been around, and we came across Medusan, we fell in love when it said, when you see their true form, it'll melt your mind. Yeah. And we're like, that has to be in a kid show. We're like, that is amazing. Just that concept alone.
And then Rock Talk, initially Rock Talk's arc was Rock Talk was going to become the security officer. And so we're like, well, who would make the worst security officer? this giant brute, but it's a little girl who doesn't want any sort of conflict. Like, what a great, like, but she's clearly the strongest one in the room. So again, comedy and conflict, right?
And a
No, wait,
captain who thinks he's the captain or thinks
Yeah,
he's
the worst captain, the guy who
yeah,
doesn't think of
yeah.
anyone else but himself, you know.
yeah. Okay, you said originally was going to be security. So the fact that Rock found her calling in science and goes against even type, you've got the brute who's a little girl, but you wind up with, and on top of that, the brute would rather be a scientist. Was that later? The way you said initially made me
No,
kind
no,
of,
no. I think that was always, I think what was always interesting to us is when we go, oh, it's like this gentle giant, this little girl who's in this hulking. There's a really interesting thing of how people perceive her. I'm like, well, naturally, she'd be a security officer. And it really was touching to go, I like something else. I don't want to be a fighter. So just that kind of vulnerability is what stuff like that is what we're excited about as storytelling. So we kind of create characters around moments like that. In
And I
terms
do
of having
remember,
the science, I don't know if it was always, I'm not sure if it was always science.
no, I remember, Dan, it was in the writer's room where we kind of found that. And it was in those early episodes, you know, when they're on the what's the planet, the plant eating planet, you know,
the murder planet, right?
murder planet, yes. Um,
Larry, I think I was.
or no, what she like, yeah, it was
Like
Planet
Larry.
Larry is what she wanted to call
Yeah.
it, Larry. But you know, we started when you start to write it and you start to see how adorable that she likes animals and was interested in the wildlife. Yeah, you start to kind of you have to be fluid enough. Usually we have a very strong concrete vision, very strong ending. But when you're in there, oh, you start to find little things that maybe you are going to detour a character and
I
just
think someone had mentioned about like her relationship with Gwen was kind of not very strong in the beginning because they were kind of enemies. So she would gravitate towards Janeway, and Janeway was a scientist. And there was a lot of interesting, like, in the writer's room, we would talk about how do what are the things that form you that if you don't know what you want. I mean, again, you think about kids, they don't know what they want to, I mean, they have ideas of what they want to do when they grow up, but a lot of them don't know. And how do those ideas
Yeah.
form?
yeah.
Well, and then I wonder if part of the mix of this was it's aimed for kids, and some of the lucky kids have Star Trek parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles. But I guess if you're one of the appeals to being cross-generational right out of the gate is if you say, "Oh, we have a Medusan, we have a Tellarite," and then at some point along the way was Jane. You had the training hologram. Was it always? I mean, you had to get Kate to be on board. Did it start with Janeway, and did you have a backup plan B if it wasn't? If Kate said no, I don't want to be, you couldn't talk her into it.
We were like Janeway was in the first sentence of like right after we said no, and we're like, what? Wait, what if it was about a bunch of kids who didn't know anything? And they're at that time verbatim, we're like, and their Sensei Wu was was Captain Janeway. It was they go, oh, that's
Throw a
great. And then we
Ninjago
went to
terminology
Walkie, and then
again.
Walkie's like, this is the time period it would be in, and like Walkie kind of gave us our what lane to be in. But it's like, all those instincts I think were very quick.
Huh. You started to say something.
Oh, I heard Dan say Sensei Wu. I'm like, you're throwing
It's a
Ninjago
Ninjago
terminology.
reference, but like story wise, we're like, but these fallible kids who don't know what they're doing, but they need a guy, they need someone,
Mhm.
they need a guru,
They need a
like,
sensei guru. Yeah,
they need
I
yeah.
their
yeah,
sensei.
I just remember it was always her. I mean, we thought about all the different captains, and you know, we wanted a captain, and just between all the captains, she was the best. She was just
Yeah.
perfect.
Well,
She
if
was
if
like our
you're
Mary
looking at it
Poppins.
as the captain bar, then I agree. I asked you this and we kind of went over it regarding Rock Talk. The fact that she's a bricker and that's not a screen canon, but that's from one of the novels. Was that a
That
leap?
was David Mack. So David Mack, we were talking about we want to do we just had a vague idea of a real big Rocky brute character. And he goes, I always thought it was pronounced, I still thought it was pronounced Bricard, but
It
I'm going to
might
trust
be.
you
I've
guys.
never heard it, but yeah,
I think
I'd go
David
with
Mack
David.
said Ricard. Um,
I'd go with David.
and I
That's
trust
his
Dave.
world,
He was a smart guy. And
author world.
yeah, I remember one thing the one thing we couldn't get in there that we didn't do was Ricard have gravity belts. I'm like, I don't know if we can have her like walking around with a gravity belt the whole time, but That's one thing we cut. Sorry,
Oh,
guys.
all right. All right. Well, one thing is this was fun. I remember I saw this somewhere. The whole thing, I guess I'm going to overlap a little bit. I can't keep everything in little boxes. So you're developing this. It's the Nickelodeon. Can you talk a little bit about how this shifted? This was a tweet I found somewhere where they're talking about they would have Prodigy, and I remember this, and Paramount Plus would pick it up and run it with the other shows, and then it flipped, right?
Yeah,
Well,
it was a challenge. First of all, Nickelodeon's under the same corporation, right?
Right.
CBS. So when they got whiff that there was going to be like a family friendly or kids Star Trek show, they just jumped on it before they even heard what we were doing.
no,
And
but
so
remember they were separated though too, like CBS and Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon was in its own lane, but then all of a sudden, when all these streamers kind of started bulking up, I remember they're like, no, it's going to be under the CBS banner. And we're like,
yeah,
oh, I guess we have two bosses now. We got Nickelodeon and we got CBS. And then it was like, well, also Paramount Plus. And we're like, we just felt like, what's going on? Like this is a weird way to make a TV show.
they all want it. Yeah, it's the rise of the streaming wars. It was
Yeah.
confusing. Everyone, I think when they started to see what we were creating, they felt like, wow, this is a premium looking show. Let's put this, Paramount Plus wanted it, but Nickelodeon didn't want to let go of it. And so they decided, let's share it, and so we were just kind of caught in the middle of almost like two parents who wanted their child to stay with them.
And
So,
Brian Robbins
Well,
was new. Brian Robbins was new-ish, I think. And yeah, it was a new regime at Nickelodeon. And I remember they bought it sight unseen. They didn't even know what it was. They just knew it was a Star Trek animated thing. And then when we pitched Brian, we basically told Brian, we're like, this isn't your down the middle Nickelodeon thing. This is aged up. This has got a little bit more. And he was like, amazing. I love it. Let's go big. Let's go. So
so they were very supportive of they allowed us just to make the show that we wanted to make. So
yeah.
they're very thankful for that. But I think, all of this, hey, it's a Nickelodeon show. I'm like, this doesn't feel like on brand of what our show is, but
Well, I was going to say it sounds like on the free reign to go do what you want to do was great. It's just on the promotion and distribution side they kind of fell
yeah,
down.
yeah,
Yeah.
they
Well,
struggle.
let me show one thing before we do one of get a little further. So as things were winding down, it was like the death. I don't say the death. The final days of the last little skeleton people working on season 2, and Aaron, we were going to go to lunch, and he said, "You want to look around the show?" And everything was mostly empty by then. But I
Yeah,
took a few shots, and I'm glad because now I got some things commemorated. But he was laughing. So these are your doors here, right?
is that
Yep.
So
right?
like the SpongeBob Empire is over here,
Oh yeah.
and he was saying that like you all have like a nothing, like you couldn't compete because that's what the studio wanted secrecy and all of that. So
Well, we had a big thing too, where early on they're like, we had to be behind locked doors. Like I remember like before we began, they were like,
That's
people
not
are going to
Dan and
try to
I.
sneak in. They're going to try to see the ships. They're going to like,
Yeah, we were just warned that like every Star Trek show has to have locked doors. I'm like, okay. So,
and so this was like the only place in Nickelodeon that had like locked doors that
mhm.
were able to like. So
yeah.
it almost kind of like made this weird relationship where we were the weird guys who would come in and boop, go into the locked doors and not fraternize with anybody because we were.
We were like Willy Wonka going, into the factory making something. Yeah.
Let me add, so I've got some questions here from folks. Let me you mentioned the one. So Josh is saying, first of all, hey Melanie, you had said, how do you guys come up with your ideas for Prodigy and all your other brilliant shows? I think we've kind of touched that. But Josh says, can you guys talk about what it's like to write with your brother, like Star Trek and otherwise, like just what that dynamics? He says, I feel like it'd be hard to work on a creative project with my brother.
What? What can be
What?
hard?
We never argue about anything.
Oh my gosh, we've had some mega heated battles at times, but it's like I think we've
And our
gotten better.
battles, Dan, our battles are so stupid when you look in hindsight of like we were just battling over some other project about like salt and about how salt is used with the alien race and and it was just like super heated.
And yeah, it has to be this much salt. There.
I'm like,
But yeah,
Well,
but
why
you
are we
have been
yelling over this?
you have been
writing
at
is
it for a
so
while, so
Yeah.
yeah.
well,
And
writing is so subjective, and I think anyone who's ever, if you painted a picture, imagine you're painting something, and then all of a sudden your brother comes in and just takes a brush and starts painting on the
Yeah.
paintings, and you're just like going, how do I handle this? So I think that's what it's like on a script page, and I think we've kind of learned secrets of how to communicate. It's always about communication. Oftentimes if Kevin, gosh, I would never be able to recite it, but of all people, George Bush had a great quote about you should judge people by their best qualities. I don't know what it's there. There's so it's. I think it was this one quote that I'm like, this is memorable. But it's one of those ideas of like we often look at our competitors and we judge them by their worst instincts, and that's not the way we treat our friends with the best intentions. So it sounds like goobity gook, but when Kevin's telling me something and we're in a heated place, oftentimes Kevin will say to me or I'll say to him, I'm like, what did I just say? What am I trying to say? And then like I'll be like, oh, this stupid idea of this thing is going over, yada yada. He's like, that's not what I was saying. He's like, just be quiet and listen. And so oftentimes it's like we're picturing the worst ideas, the worst versions of their ideas. And oftentimes we just need to clarify and being like, you know, that's what it usually comes down to.
um, let me see. Melanie's also asking who designed developed the project characters. If they're developing, but we'll get to maybe some artists here in a minute. Let me hold off on that. Um, yeah. Why don't here's so the next thing I'm curious about is so you guys sold the show and then staffed up for writers first. One thing I want to talk about tonight is just how the hell the animation industry worked, in a nutshell. Like there's a million names and
In a
credits.
nutshell.
We all kind of, I know, but we know how live action works. People have a pretty good idea. There's writers, then there's pre-production, and they build sets, costumes, makeup, yada, yada. Then the visual effects and music and sounds come in, and then it's ready to go out. And there's so many different
I have to
like
say
what the
it's the
process.
same. It's different, but it's the same, right? Um, when, yeah, we started with our writers, right?
But
And
that's kind of odd in animation. In most animation, you always start with a supervising director who has a vision of something, usually, like has a visual style. Like if it was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they'd get this is the new look of it, what it is. But like we, as writers who have established a little bit of a track record, they brought in us first. And I think we kind of bake a lot of ideas to then go to directors, right, Kevin?
yeah, and we start well, but first we had the writers before we even had Ben.
No, we had a director. We had directors before we brought writers in.
Oh, really? But
Okay, boys, now don't fight.
yeah. Whoa, whoa,
Our memories
whoa.
are usually what you need is
But
you need
like
someone you need someone on the art side to like help facilitate ideas and make mood boards and things like that because you get someone and you start working simultaneously where the art like Ben Iban was our kind of our guru of the art
Mhm.
stuff. So he was using his working relationships and like Nickelodeon would be like, here's some animators from Paw Patrol and be like, thank you, but I'm not going to use these people. I want to get this guy from Spain. I'm going to get this person from yada, yada, yada. And so he's bulking up like a bullpen of artists with specific things of this person's for lighting, this person's doing textures, this person's doing environments. And meanwhile, Kevin and I are usually what we do is we'll write a pilot first. So we'll write an actual, so we wrote, I couldn't tell you what the name, Lost and Found, which
Mhm.
was a two-parter. We wrote that as our pilot, right, Kevin? And then we start going to writers, and then we kind of make a list. We start reading a lot of scripts. We start trying to figure out what room do we want, how many people are going to be in this room, what are the voices we're looking for. Um,
the studio also wants to know what are you going to do? Like, you have 20 episodes. What are you going to do with them? And so we create a story grid and we really map out and track the character arcs and make sure we really have a phenomenal ending.
But none of this was a part about selling it. They came to you, you all talked, and then you said, it'll be a kid's show. We think we'll do this. And all of this detail work happened after it was going to be a thing.
Yeah, yes. And
so it starts with trust in your resume and trust in your background.
And a pitch. We had to sell people our vision of what a show would be. They didn't just carte blanche say, hey,
right.
you have a show.
And
but you didn't have all these details. You had, it's going to be kids, they're going to be aspirational.
But we had certain details. We had at the end of our pitch, we're like, and the protostar has to be destroyed, and hologram Janeway is going to be wiped out, but she gives a speech to these kids. And we had like the really big elements. We had like episode 10 or 9 and 10 where like they have one proto jump left and they got to choose either to go to the Federation or go back and save the miners. So you have like really big, I think we call mileposts, like character mileposts. But I would say our pitch would be about 40 minutes long, 30 to 40 minutes long.
And I just have to say, like, this show is such a joy. When you're writing a movie, you're so dispensable. You're so like you just you do a draft and they're like, oh, we're tired of you, or oh, someone wants so and so, you're off. I'm like, but you know,
hey, you walk in the office, you're like, when are we gonna fire these dudes?
Yeah. It's like we get to be the captains of the ship. We get to hire everyone. We get to start with the mission statement and the vision and to really like inspire people.
We got to create the culture we want, you know.
We got to create the culture. We got to work side by side with all the artists, you know, and it's magical to be able to do that, you know, all the way through the special effects and through the, you know, we'd help direct the actors and how they performed and everything. It was just a joy.
Well, let me jump back to share screen for a second. And there's so much I want to get through here. But just, again, for people sitting at home, and we hear about the episodes week to week, but just a little bit more. Like, for instance, this is, okay, yeah. So this is one of the early shows, one of the early shots you all somebody had on their socials. Can you just run down? This is basically the room, the writer's room, right? Yep. Can you run through and just mention everybody and like just a line or something about them or what you remember from? Because I know some people came and some new came for season 2.
Erin McNamara, we had read her script and we had met her maybe a year before, 2 years before, and she had moved out here and she was a great writer, but we brought her on as our assistant, and she later became a writer. And she ended up writing the Janeway Chakotay episode. I don't know who that dude is next to her. That's me. There's Chad Quant. Chad Quant and Aaron Walke used to be writing partners on Troll Hunters, but they've kind of gone there. They have a little different style, but they're both really great guys. And so we've known them both from Troll Hunters. Then you have Kev, you want to keep going?
Yeah, you know, Aaron Walke or the Benson sisters. Yeah. You know, who are phenomenal writers, and most of these writers come from the live action world. We did not want the writers of Justice League animated show or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were like, this is going to be treated like a live action show. Like, we want really, really sophisticated, highbrow, you know, writing abilities. And so the Bensons came off of a show called The 100. And
no, I just wanted to mention a funny story. We were like, we had met them and we thought it was so fun that they were sisters and we were brothers. And like, we tried to get them on something else we were about to work on. And they basically said no to us. And I'm like, oh, they're like, but if you ever got anything on Doctor Who or Star Trek, and we had just came back from this meeting, whatever it is, like, we actually do have something for Star Trek. So that was great to bring them, to get them involved.
And we wanted to, like, you know, we really wanted a writer's room that was diverse, that had a lot of different perspectives, people who were super fans of Trek, people who weren't, you know, who weren't very knowledgeable about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Deandra is next to Shauna Benson. Deandra was an this writer's assistant in the Picard room. And so
Mm-hmm.
she worked in the very first season 1 Picard when they had
She's in that famous picture of Patrick and the original. Yes.
yeah,
Where they're
like
sitting at the
there's like
table.
4
Yeah.
people in the room and she's one
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
And she writes a lot of kind of genre. She had a great like Buffy the Vampire like script, and she is just like I love Deandra. She brings so much joy into the room. That I would. She's like one of those people that she smiles and you're just like today's going to be great.
Above her is Keith Sweet, who started off as our assistant. He then became we're ready to move him up to become a writer's assistant. And whenever a writer is presented to us, they have a writing sample. And we kept asking him, "Where's your writing sample?" And he's like, "I'm working on it." And he finally wrote this writing sample that blew us away. It was like Stranger Things in Compton. And it was just awesome. And it was youth and it felt real. And it was just, you could just tell the kid was a great talent. So we actually hired him to be, we bumped him up from being skipping being a writer's assistant, and he became our youngest staff writer.
I think he's like the youngest Star Trek episode writer, I think, ever. I think he was 24, 25.
Did he break David Gerald's record, maybe?
How old is David Gerald?
He was in college, so it may have been he
No,
was
then
21,
probably
22.
not. Someone had told us that thing.
Someone said that he was the youngest. Keith was the youngest somehow.
Maybe of the modern era, maybe.
Maybe that's so. And we're working with Keith on something right now. So we see Keith all the time. Lisa Schultz Boyd had written one of the best. When we probably read about 100 scripts, and her script was the best. It was a very grounded sci-fi. I'm trying to best how to explain it, like Dune. Like it was so rich in mythology, and we ended up finding out that she was actually in a writers group with the Bensons, which I thought was interesting.
Huh.
And Nikhil was a writer who we had met staffing for a show that ended up not going right before this. So we actually had as luck would have it, I don't know if the show would be, I don't think Prodigy would be as good as if this other show right before it didn't like fall apart. So we had another show that we were supposed to be working on. And Nikhil was going to be a part of that room. Nikhil was someone who was, he didn't know Star Trek as much as other people, but he was very great at the sophisticated moral dilemmas and character work. And so he wrote Time Amok,
Oh my gosh.
one of my favorite episodes.
I say Time Amok. Well, I've got to steal here in a minute, but I was so blown away just from the simplicity of the complexity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That it was like, it was the time of all the time shows. It was that graphic sells it. And I heard later on that it was actually like they actually did a thing to get it into the script, right?
David Mack has a lot to do with that episode, because I remember, so David Mack would read our treatments, or maybe it was the script. I'm not sure.
He was our paid Star Trek advisor, right, Dan?
Yeah. And so when we wrote this, he wrote this long note that said, "Guys, this is, I think, is the best time shenanigan Star Trek episode I've ever read." He's like, "It's got everything." And he just started listening of like the teamwork faction, he just absolutely loved it. And I remember our initial concept is we just love the idea of time fracturing in different places on the ship. And it was David Mack who said, "But what's interesting about time is that it oscillates." And we're like, "I don't know what that means." And he said, "Oscillate. It's like the sine wave goes like this, and it has different speed. It goes fast, super slow, mid fast, and it was really interesting to us." And so, yes. And it was just really, because it's like we would go back to where are people on the ship and whose stories do we want to go to, and which one would be Murph? Where would Murph be? Because we can't have too much. Where would Rock be? And that was just a lot. I think that was when we finally, caught our stride in Star Trek. I felt like that was the episode where I felt like, okay, we're Star Trek writers.
And the thing that gets me about, we talk about, for kids and also adults, but the thing is, like, if you stop and just ponder, like, how long was Rock Talk by herself?
We said it, and then Nickelodeon said this, we can't say that. That's too that's too grim.
What
Too harsh.
was it?
We, we can't say.
It's
We
too
can't.
long.
It was several
Too
hundred
long.
years, wasn't it? I mean, it was.
No, but when you get a line like how long was it? It's too long. Like, oh.
Yeah.
Sorry if I missed you. So let me okay. Oh gosh, time is getting away from us here. So just throw these in. Just you guys look like you were having a good time there as
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
There's McGregor Middleton in the back right.
Here?
So he was our producer who left Nickelodeon for Netflix. But if you watch I can't tell you the episode. There's a character in the second season that gets eaten by the loom and
When they go to
wiped,
the ziggurat, when they're in the ziggurat.
and he gets wiped from existence. And so that was our gift to McGregor Middleton. It is his voice on the episode. It is his likeness. So if we rewatch that episode, that's the guy.
Okay. Okay. Well, and then this must be pandemic time. You guys are having
I swear, like if we didn't have this show carried us through the pandemic, to have, I can't imagine being out of work or something, to be able to have this, to be that it was animated, that we could all pretty much just go home and work and draw and build from our computers and keep making the show. It was just so important and special.
Yeah. Let me okay. I need to ask you, and if you can't, that's fine. Can we go a little past an hour?
Yeah.
Or are you guys on time?
That's okay.
Okay. Okay. I promise not to abuse it, but this is all just golden. We got to talk about the cast actually now. And this is a great little title that was put together from somebody with the mains. Was it like long, arduous to get to people? Were there some you wanted to grab and just have place for them? What was there a brief story for everybody?
We got everyone we wanted.
Yeah. Like Kate was frightening, just like we really wanted to make sure we got her.
I feel like she's a special case. I mean, like
yeah. But there's a moment where like maybe she's gonna say no. Maybe they can't make her deal. Maybe I don't like do we have a show without her? Like she's so pinnacle. Let's like from the starting from
the hardest one to cast was Gwen. We heard a lot of people for Gwen. And when we came across Ella Purnell, we were like, we just thought we like that smoky texture in her voice, and she was just perfect. And I love seeing her blow up right now with all the stuff she's doing. It just goes to show
out everything else she's doing.
You'd have to no way she'd do this if you got a season 3, right?
Oh yeah, she'd totally do it.
Oh yeah, everyone
would do it.
Everyone has said like, oh,
that's good. That's good to hear, because I have noticed her blowing up in the good way.
Yeah.
That's great for her.
And what's good too for an animated show. It's not hard for she'd have to come in once every couple of months and we record for a couple of hours. It's an easy
job. It's an easy easy check.
So Brett
was someone we had someone else pegged for the part, and then he came in and blew us away. And I just remember thinking that his voice has so much life to it and encapsulates the captain who acts like he knows what he's doing. And I love, like, we've gotten to know Brett quite a bit, and I love his journey. He's like, because he didn't know much about Star Trek, and he's the epitome of the guy who's like, I don't know what this world is, but I love it. And so he was fantastic.
For Jank and Pog, we always knew, we were like, it has to be Jason Mantzoukas, because like we started with this sort of like, what would be like a younger Danny DeVito, like what would a teenage Danny DeVito sound like? And we're like, and we just love Jason Mantzoukas, and we just thought he would be so funny.
I love that image, young Danny DeVito. That's
yeah.
D. Bradley Baker, I think we had mentioned this earlier in some other interviews. We didn't want to cast an actor. We wanted to use real walrus sounds, because we wanted to sound like a real life animal. I guess we didn't think human beings sounded like good aliens. And then we heard D. Bradley Baker. We're like, oh my gosh, we were so wrong. This guy can sound like anything. He plays his face like an instrument. Like he's got his fingers. He's like, what? He'll like do these things, and you're just like, what is going on? He plays it like a pan flute.
Angus, who plays Zero, Angus is. We saw Angus from was it The Boy Who Would Be King?
Boy Who Would Be King. He played a young Merlin with
someone in our writer's room, I think
Patrick Stewart. That was
showed.
me.
Oh, was that you? Yeah,
I'd
you were
watched
looking
that
up.
movie. I'm like, this kid who plays young Merlin just has it. It wasn't even so much the androgynousness of the voice, but it was just this lilt, this like high lilt, kind of very prestige. It had it had something to his voice that we felt very different from everybody else. The same way we talked about how they all have different sizes and shapes and things like that. Their voices are all very, very different.
Yeah. And then
Does he and he's over has
He's
he ever
English,
set
yeah.
foot in the States? Because he's never, as far as I know, I'd never see him at any appearances.
no, no,
We did an appearance in London and he loved it. He gave the most eloquent answers and like he's a teacher. I mean, not when I say a teacher, I'm like when he talks about his character, Zero, he Angus has a way of talking to kids to make them understand like what's going on with Zero and why is Zero
Mhm.
special and things like that. And he handles everything beautifully.
mhm.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
Riley, it was a challenge, like to find a young actress who really had a wonderful, emotive voice. And she just, sometimes in animation you have these older actresses who will they can put on a kid voice and they do kid voice. And we're
Mhm.
like, no, we need a real sounding kid. And they're like, well, the kid's voice is going to change. They're going to grow up. And I'm like, I don't care.
Good.
We'll let the character grow up then, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I
Yeah.
love that. When, Rock
You like
Talk
the
is
authenticity of it. Yeah.
so adorable because of her performance. It feels so real. She's the
Yeah.
child of the group. Yeah.
I'm just gonna be let me I'm gonna try something. I think this works with Zoom. I wanted to see, and I don't want to spend, a ton of time because we're quasi and overtime, but I wanted to people watch the show, and I've tried to do what I could over time to educate people about titles and like who's in the front titles and all that kind of thing. And the modern era is different than, 20 years ago with the older Treks and as it was from the 60s. And I wondered if we could just do something.
Sure.
Can I just run the opening credits? And I'm going to skip the cast because they say the actors always get the attention. They don't have to worry about it. Can we just like stop and pause and you say, because part of what this is some of these producers up front are writers who are climbing the ladder, and that's their perk. And then some of them are producers. And I just wondered if you would just do a quick mention about everybody as they fly by.
Sure.
Could we do that? I'll even pause. Now I'm gonna make sure this works. I think it should. Um, Hopefully it will show up. Is this going to? Oh, see, I didn't know if it was going to block.
Might be. Yeah, I think this might block. I think
The
we've tried
music, the audio is coming through, but yeah.
How about you just tell us the names?
I will. That's my backup. That's my plan B for not getting Kate.
screenshots.
Yeah, let me do this. I'll do it. So, I
I
mean,
have to
first,
say that opening though, that animation that came in, when I first saw the opening finish animation, and when Michael Giacchino delivered our main theme score, I was just like, it was just amazing. I love our theme. I
well,
love.
it's like the titles even evoke Voyager's opening titles in a ramped up kind of
Yeah,
way,
yep,
with all the yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So after the cast, we have Michael Giacchino and Nami here, the composers,
Composers.
and then come on, there we go. Um, so after that is Jennifer Muro, co-producer.
Jennifer
So again,
Murrow,
a
yeah, when you
writer.
get to a certain level as a writer, that you just usually in their contracts they'll say, "Well, we're at this level."
Yeah,
If you get
I'm
to that level, you get a credit up front.
yeah, I'm in season 2, by the way. So we may be
Yeah,
flip.
she's on her season 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking at season two's opening credits. So the line I just skipped her. Uh, Jennifer, say
Jen
Jennifer
Gay.
Gray. Jennifer, the line producer.
Yeah, Jen Gay is so she took over from McGregor Middleton. So McGregor Middleton was our basically like our line producer. He was the guy with the how much is this going to cost? How do we allocate the
Nuts and
money?
bolts producer, right? Keeps you on schedule, crunches
Mhm.
the numbers, keeps things that helps tell you when you're getting off budget. You know what I mean?
Which
Jen
which
Gay
is
was
pretty
doing
much the
that.
same for live action, a line
Yeah,
producer. would do.
Yeah, and she works. Yeah, we'll get to her. Tanya is also kind of works with her as well. So a lot of
Um,
Excel spreadsheets.
so we've got producer Robin Johnson.
Yes, she's like Alex Kurtzman's producing partner. You know, they're always split up overseeing all the different shows. So she was our point person.
So there's Alex, Aaron Byers, Heather Caden, and then Robin Johnson was their junior. So she's the one who's coming to all of our meetings and things like that, making sure that their presence is involved. So she's
Making sure that Dan and I don't poop the bed.
And good thing to do. And Heather has left the company, right? Has she gone off on her own since?
Yeah, she went off
So
to
Robin
Rainy
was kind
Media
of a Heather in
Partners.
training.
No, Aaron Byers. So when Heather moved, then Aaron Byers moved up. So
Oh, okay.
Aaron Byers is Alex's right hand right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, so she's the new Aaron, I guess, then.
Yeah,
With that. Okay. See,
Yeah.
people, and then who've got, speaking of Aaron, got Aaron Walke, who's come up the ladder. So when you all first started, like, did you have like a mini room before you blew up to the big room?
No,
No.
we had, I mean, we used him as a friend of like, hey, what, kind of like a sounding board here and there, but not much. What he was one of, of all the staff writers.
I thought you had maybe, I thought I'd heard you had like two or three, but then you tell me.
No, we had 9 writers in the room, and they were all. I mean,
Okay.
although some have probably more credits to their names, we tried to never have a seniority issue. We feel like every voice is equal in the room.
Yeah. I meant just chronologically. Did you have like a little group before you hired up a full room?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We had David Mack as the consultant.
Yeah, but he wasn't like in a small room with us.
No.
Yeah. So Patrick Krebs, co-producer, co-exec.
Yep. He is one of our captains of the ship, I would say, and he oversees pretty much the animation. He makes sure that the animation looks fantastic, the effects, making sure things move, correct, ships fly correctly, phasers are shooting correctly.
He's talking to Technicolor in India every week, going, "This looks good. Can we make this better? Or there's problems in the pipeline."
Yeah, and you guys would laugh. Like, it was COVID when we were starting to animate. Technicolor India was doing this, and they were in COVID lockdown too. So all of those artists were in their homes creating a shot, and a lot of them did not know Star Trek. They had phasers shooting and doing this and that, and ships doing this and this. And we get this animation back. We're like, we're going to get killed. We cannot show this. Like, we need to fix this. And he loves Star Trek. So he helped.
Yeah, he's a
love
massive
language of
Trek
Star
fan.
Trek. Yeah.
When we first met him, he collects all the little, I think it's not Eagle, all the little ships.
Eagle Moss stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then yeah. Then Ben Hebon. How is it Hebon? How does he say it?
Ebon.
We didn't know that until like a year. We always called him Ben Hibben, and then in an interview, he's like, "It's Ebon."
And we're like, Ben, why have you let us say your name wrong all this? Like, it was like 2 years, Dan. It was
He's
ridiculous.
like, "I'm French Swiss." It's whatever.
But Ben he's our third brother. I mean, this show is great because of him. I mean, that guy is a true artist. I can't wait to work with him again. He's just amazing.
Well, good. If okay, let me switch back because then it's all this executive producers, and I think everybody's up with that.
Yeah.
But speaking of, who are we just speaking of? Well, a couple of people. The day that Aaron gave me a quick tour around the almost empty offices, a couple of people and these are not opening titles people, but I caught them at their desks because they were doing just the last little bit of work,
Jason Myers.
So this is Jason Meyer.
Yep.
Yep.
He works really closely with Patrick. He's the one who's like cleaning up the shots that don't look good. He's the one going in there.
So let's say like a shot comes back from India and a character moves weird, or there's just something artificial about it.
There we are.
Gets in there, or a facial performance where it's like a dramatic emotional moment. And the character is like, you're like, no, and he gets in there and gets the the second little like the eye looks the wrong way because the character's thinking and the mind is racing or whatever, he finds those little
But I
minutiae.
think it's also worth to say that he's not making everything perfect because we don't have the time or budget to do that. So usually what his job is like, wow, I've got 30 shots that look weird, and we're like, we have time. What are the 12 that if we fix, it'll somewhat save us? Yeah. So there's always stuff that's in the episode that Kevin, myself, Ben, Jason, Patrick, we're like, we cringe. We're like, oh, that animation does not look good. You just don't have the time to fix everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other name,
is
I was going to
the
say the other one here actually took hardware.
yeah, art director.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's like Ben's right hand.
Yeah, he's like Ben's right hand, and I wish that award could have been given to him and Ben because Ben deserves that just as much. Like together they created the look and the design of everything.
This is
Patrick.
Patrick. There we go. Yeah.
There's his
We
little
mentioned
ships.
earlier. Yeah, there's his office you were talking about with all
And,
his ships.
that's again, I think you see it in our show. You get people like Patrick who love Star Trek, who because of his job, he would probably never be on a live action Trek show. He lives and breathes animation. And when this came, it was just like the perfect baby for him to work on it. He just
The
went
best
above
of
and
both
beyond.
worlds.
Yeah, best of both worlds. Once in a lifetime chance to do this, and he just put everything in.
Yeah. And then you were mentioning Ben, who was around
Yeah. When were
that
you
day.
took these pictures?
Hmm?
You took these pictures?
Yeah, this was April last year. Like
That's great.
this was
And
like the dying. I've got some of like the vast empty cubicles, and
yeah.
this was
I
some.
think
So there's
Ben
Ben.
made Dal's hair to look like his own.
So I love capturing that. That's just awesome. But that's
If
yeah.
you zoom into if you go back, I don't know if you
Uh-huh.
can zoom in, the picture furthest to the right,
Over here.
that was Ben's first sketch of what he thought the characters looked like.
Oh my gosh. No, I don't think I can here, but
And that looks like the ugly Murph.
Yeah.
oh, it
And
is.
the finished versions are not that far away from his first design.
It looks like a lead slightly melted Hershey's Kiss or something.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, is there any plan to do a making of Prodigy or a development of Prodigy book or?
We tried. We were close. We had a lot of plans, and
Yeah.
when Paramount decided to erase our show, it stopped a lot of other things. I think that even like Playmates had a plan, and everyone just started to scale back and canceled.
I think it'll come out at some point. I just feel like,
Yeah.
you
Everything
know,
about Star Trek comes out at some point.
yeah.
It just it isn't as fast as we'd like it, but yeah.
We were,
So thank you
yeah, we
guys.
always remain hopeful.
Yeah.
We're so proud of the show. We think it holds up. I think people 20 years from now will find it, and
I
I
know
think
they
time will be kind to it.
it's been I'm gonna flip through some, so there's some more just promotional. There's Heather.
yeah.
Everybody else we've had a mention of. So I've got so I want to hit some questions here in a minute, but I've got some personal questions. So we
All
touched
right.
on this earlier. I was shocked and thrilled that you had a Tellarite character as a regular, because I'm one of the ones that I just remembered in the beginning. I loved Journey to Babel because it was the one out of the original series where they actually got off the ship, or they refer to the world outside, not just Starfleet, but the Federation itself finally.
Yeah.
And the Andorians and Tellarites come from that show. And then finally the Andorians got their due with, Jeff Combs on Enterprise. And
Yeah.
it's like, who's the one founder that no one's ever,
Yeah.
I almost wanted to say, was it also part of the deal that you went to Medusans and Tellarites because they were kind of a empty slate? But I just wanted to say that's awesome. And then over the time with the live action shows now, we've got the Tusk Tellarites, we've got the ones more like Jankum. And so my other question was going to be, yay, thank you for doing that. You said why you went that way. It was a perfect fit. But did you consciously choose not to do this? And then when Noam came along, you decide, I call these guys biker Tellarites, and then I was thrilled when you had this scene with biker Tellarites. But
Yeah.
and then I wanted to say this was an awesome moment because to me this was like the Bechdel test for Tellarites. It's like there had
Yes.
never been two Tellarites in one scene speaking lines together. Did you know that?
Well, yeah, the starting place for us with Jankum was because he's sort of an orphan. He's never truly been with his kind, right? He hadn't, and I think he probably assumes all Tellarites are his height and size, and only to find out that, he's a little diminutive for a species. So,
Well, Noam was kind of on the slender side for a Tellarite, but that's species diversity that I guess we have.
True,
But
yes. He's
did
just
you
in
in,
shape, very
did you
much.
intentionally steer away from not doing the tusk, the modern look of the tusk Tellarite?
I think I remember right before the final, like things were moving very fast and we didn't quite like I remember I was even really worried about the look of Jankum, like right when we were working on the pilot or the no, there wasn't much. I think we were trusting Ben. We are like, okay, we would look at things and go, this definitely feels off or this feels right. And I think this was the one. He was a character that was hard to get right. I think I remember.
Yeah. Well, it was fascinating to me. I appreciate it. I'll just say this. I've never liked these. The rest of the world was fighting over the Discovery Klingons, and I was just upset that we suddenly had tusks. And I went, okay, species diversity. That's the catchword of the days now. But I love this scene because I was saying, please, I was thrilled to see Noam come out in Janeway's crew, and then I was like, please, you got to get these guys together in a scene once because it would be historic. And
Yeah.
again, I don't know if that was part of the recipe, but that's and I made sure to
Yeah, we,
point
we
that
love
out
the idea of two Tellarites facing off with each other and
and
just like
actually
putting each
talking,
other down.
not
And
not
I
the
remember
ambassador's aide or something, in the back.
And I remember there was a conversations of like, what does a young Tellarite look like? There's a lot of like, well, are they all super hairy? Like, what's the right amount of hair? What's the right amount of tusks?
I might be wrong. There might have been something live action. Well, there probably was, but female Tellarites aren't exactly a big thing explored yet either.
I
But
think Picard had just come out too. I remember they had the new Tellarite there in that
mhm,
one as well.
yeah, um, I just loved. I guess, and this was part of your DNA, but I just love this because it's basically Janeway giving a one. Your whole bit about it's a primer for kids or even adults that don't know anything about Star Trek, and there's so much of those early episodes that's just it's just a primer. Here's
Yeah.
Star Trek 101 or whatever. And
Yeah.
I just appreciate this because the Tellarite symbol had, again, weird for me. But I could tell that, and I should ask you this. The first episode, the pilot, starts off very Star Warsy, and I was a little worried. And then by the time it got to the end of the part two, and they're on it's Starfleet's hyper Okudagram cannon
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the so it was like that feels like it was almost the intro. Hey kids, you're used to seeing Star Wars stuff.
Totally.
We'll pull you in, but we will send you out the back door with the right way.
Yeah, or even like, people say Star Wars, but I'm like Guardians of the Galaxy or any other sort of fun, swashbuckling,
Yeah.
space adventure. You know, that was our intent, was to bring
Space
people
adventure.
into the Trek universe. And so to
Yeah.
do that, because these characters don't know anything, that means we got to start outside of it, right? And so I
It
thought,
also kind of makes you question of like, well, what is Trek? Like, what is the difference between, what makes Trek Trek? And I think it's smart people or people trying to figure out problems. And I'm like, well, so where do you start if you're not in Trek? If you open up, you're on a slave planet and there's robots that you can kill and not have it be too bloody because it's a kid show, you know?
Yeah. Um, Let me see. I had some other things pulled. I'm gonna skip over them. Just some of these scenes and so much. A lot of this you've talked about in other interviews and all that. I just wanted to say also, I just loved when you revealed the real Janeway and her crew. I just again thought it was awesome that you had an Andorian Tellarite. I don't know what the choice was behind that, but I just
And then Admiral
yeah,
Janeway was in the original pitch as well. We always
yeah,
talk about it's the
okay.
fugitive. It's
Was Chakotay always part of it too?
yeah.
yeah. We wanted an
And her
emotional,
going back. Yeah. And that
yeah,
that whole arc. Let me see here. There's our
And
time
again, like Dan
publisher.
said quickly, we were one of our, if you look at like inspirations for us, outside of Star Trek films and shows, The Goonies is a big inspiration for us when we created
Mm-hmm.
this. And then when Janeway, yeah, Admiral Janeway comes in, it was The Fugitive. We loved when you look at Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones, you have this great cat and mouse hunt, right? But you love Tommy Lee Jones. He's not a bad guy, he's the antagonist, but you love him. You love this. He's a smart detective hunting, Kimball down, and Kimball's trying to prove his innocence. And so we're like, what a great dynamic that is. And so we're like, yeah, let's have real Janeway hunting
And we
down.
love the idea of like kids got to figure out how to fly a ship together. They got to get their act together. And who better to chase them than Starfleet? And you're like, oh, that is a litmus test
Mm-hmm.
of like,
Yeah.
can you survive that? Can you get away? Probably
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
I just got to say, for anybody that, the first episode started, I mean, it's exposition and you're
Yeah.
introducing characters and you've got Murder Planet and you've got some fun, but by I'll tell you, the one that got me as you're getting along through the first season, the episode where they're getting into it, you've introduced the real Janeway and her and
Kobayashi or the
well, that was a lot of fun, and we should maybe mention that. But when she's got no, I've just gone blank on her Andorian that I just Tysus, right?
Tysus.
Um, uh, when by the time you get to there, what Tysus has a line, they're talking about the Romulans and what to do, and Tysus says, "But won't that interfere with the negotiations?"
Yeah.
And I went, "Holy shit! That's the Romulans. That's the android. That's the Mars attack." And,
Yeah.
and the Romulan supernova, and I went,
Deandra
shit.
talking about this is what happened in the season that hasn't come out yet, and this is what we're dealing with. So
Well, no,
we
I
have
mean,
a
I think
style.
well, you knew about the supernova and everything happening, in general. And if you didn't know Picard, but I just want like, Jesus, you guys really are hooked in. This really is canon that's interwoven. And the other thing was, it's just out there and they move right along. Nobody says, and by the way, Picard and the Romulans and the Romulan super. I mean,
Yeah, we didn't
yes,
want to bore kids.
right. But
We
this
wanted to
is what I
like
mean
their
about
interest. Yeah.
the classic Looney Tunes thing about it's there if you know, and if not, it's the same thing on Lower Decks. It's there if you know, and if you don't, it's fine. You just move along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're very proud of that.
Anyway, I just wanted to pass that. That was my personal thing. But the other thing, and you talked about when you make choices out of the gate. Here we go. Just to throw these in case people aren't aware, but I mean, I didn't get it at first. I got a hint, but really, you guys, the degree, and we were just living in Okudagrams and old school, the tech stuff is there and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Was that something you insisted on? Where did that all come from? Because it's amazing. And it's paying off now with the little
I
ships.
remember we insisted there be more orange and salmon in the L cars because Ben was always just like pink and purple, and we're like, we need some orange.
I think the L cars is just a great example of, we wanted great L cars, but we wanted to do service to them. But then the guy that we had doing it loves Trek and loves L cars, and it was his like dream to, and the L cars that came back were just like, what? They were just amazing. And we could, because it's animated, we could make them three-dimensional and there's depth. And I'm like, wow. So,
Okay, so who is this wonderkin of Okudagrams?
oh my gosh.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I thought.
Oh, it's all right. I'm gonna find
Does
it.
he have some kind of like featured space, or is he just one of the illustrators that took it and ran with it, or
The
animated?
illustrators. I'm blanking right now. I want to find it while we keep talking.
Okay. Well, let me take a second and run through some of the questions that we did have from
Sure.
folks. One thing I did want to go back to, I won't even go back to the slide. We talked about the regulars, and I'm skipping over some of the, like the diviner and all but the voice cast for the others, including Tyson. I mean, you got David Diggs, you got Nathan. How did all that come about?
We had Liz Paulson was our casting director, and she brought up amazing people. She brought up Ella Purnell. She brought up David Diggs. And so oftentimes when we have a small role, there's a lot of people who want to be in a Star Trek thing, or some people that are interested. If anything, we felt,
Jason Alexander, yeah.
yeah. If anything, we wanted to give David more, but it was hard. It's hard to have too much of a Tysus
Yeah.
storyline.
We had Commander Tysus was such a small character, and then we heard we had Daveed Diggs. We're like, what? We got to do more with this character now. Like, yeah.
We tried to, you know what it is? We had storyline that was cut out because I thought it was really interesting about he is Janeway's number one going to save her old number, the Chakotay. Like, is there a jealousy there, or what is
Yeah.
that relationship? I thought that was interesting, fertile ground. But again, it's one of those things of like, is an 8-year-old gonna like that? I'm like, I don't know.
Well, that was just fascinating. And I mean, when I've already blanked on your casting person, but did she like
Liz
feel out?
Paulson,
Okay. Is this a
sister
thing?
to Sarah Paulson, the actress.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Has her pulse doubly on the
Yeah.
industry. But to that point, is this ever a thing? Does this actually happen where she's like, okay, we're going to get big names, we're going to get, talented people, people that fit the parts. Is there at any point a layer of, can we find out if they're Trek people, like if they're Trek fans, closet or not?
Usually, sometimes their agents will say, like, Jason Alexander will do anything for Star Trek. He loves
Right,
Star Trek.
right.
And we're like, I'm like, George Costanza needs to be a Tellarite.
That's true. And
Although I
maybe,
remember when he did his voice, he's like, we're like, we don't want George Costanza though.
yeah,
we wanted it to give him more.
he has a lot of gravitas for a Tellarite, but he's a tall Tellarite, so that's
Yeah.
amazing. So Crusher Convo, Jesse at Crusher Convo is saying, and I'm kind of glossing over the second season, although some of these, I guess she's going to ask this, but I'll also ask. After you launch the show and you've put the writers' room together, you had the milepost, you said. Some of these shows, like the Interpresians, kind of the lovingly kind of, mocking, or the Borg show, or the whatever, are those totally out of the room, or did you all have a few more, like, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got it somewhere along the way?
Those are usually first week in the room. We're like, here we have these mileposts of an emotional story that we want to say. We'll say we want to do like some one-off episodes, but we want to also have some serialized stuff. But what are some of we'll go, what are the greatest hits that, we get to make a Star Trek show? What episodes do we got to do? And just certain things kind of segue into story where like this, like Kobayashi was an interesting thing where we're like introducing what the holodeck is and that just kind of came naturally. Like the idea of like having the greatest hits on a bridge was like super exciting and be like, who would be on that bridge? That we had a lot of great conversations about that.
Can I also add on? We were talking about casting, but like our actress that we haven't mentioned, Jamila Jamil, who is
Yes.
phenomenal, and she's the funniest, sweetest woman, and beautiful, and she's just everything. And but like
Smart
we got
and
her.
funny, witty,
Oh, she's just yeah, she's so funny.
and
Um,
vulgar.
very vulgar. You have to keep her in check. But one of the reasons we got her was she grew up and she has a whole bunch of brothers, and they watched Star Trek as kids, and so almost
Fell right
everyone
in. Yeah.
they,
Yeah.
they understood the importance of this.
And she's Essentia?
She's a
Yes.
sense,
Yeah.
yeah,
So she
yeah,
gets to play the villain there. Yeah.
yeah.
But she can
And
say
she's
those helmsman lines.
undercover. Remember in season one, she's undercover,
Right.
and so she's the sweet, plucky, ensign.
So,
But then she gets to play the dastardly villain, and so she had a blast.
So she was popping those helmsman reply lines out. Just,
Yeah.
yeah. Warp 5, Captain. So anyway, so Jesse had asked, what was the biggest challenge in the story for season 2 versus season 1, especially with bringing in Wesley on top of having Robert Moore in as Chakotay? I mean, were they all conceived about the same time, or like sketches that you filled in? What was that like, getting to do
what
the
do you
second,
mean? What do you
Well,
mean?
we knew
writing the second
we
season?
knew like we all fell in love with bringing Wesley back, and it was so important to keep him a secret. We really wanted him to be
But he was a gift in the writers' room in the sense of when we came in, we knew like going into the writers' room for season 2, we knew we had to keep going on the storyline of what's going on with Solomon and Gwen and what's going on with Chakotay and Janeway. And those and to us it's like those both exist on Solomon 50 or so years apart. I'm like, that's interesting. I'm like, oh, great. This is going to be a time travel story. And it's like, you can't just wrap. I remember, Kevin, you were like, well, let's just like take one episode and wrap up Solomon in an episode. And I was like, it's too big of a
I said
problem.
that.
Yeah, at some point you're like, we're
Bad
just going to
idea.
show like, oh, she saved everything. I'm like, no, no, no. We got like, there's a civil war.
Oh, and I think I said that, and it goes to the question, which was what was one of the hardest things of season two. It was just a frightening time travel, realizing how complicated of a backstory we were building from season one, and we're going to now try to address it and how to make it make sense and how to not. I was just worried about losing people.
These
And
are good.
balancing that with the kids in the present and what they're,
Yeah,
But
yeah.
those are great those are good problems though, because it's like, in writing, conflict is king. And so if you're going, well, how does Gwyn save Solomon from civil war? You're like, well, I don't know. Let's see how that happens. How is she going to get Chakotay? I don't know. Let's see how that happens. And so those were our engines every day, And so when Jen Murrow says, what about the traveler, Wesley Crusher? And we're like, tell me more about what's going on. They say, and they're like, his last episode on TNG was he just froze everything and just like walked off. And we're like, nobody knows what's happened to him since. We're like, that's interesting. This is something, this sounds delicious, and
play
so
with this. Yeah.
and that's how it gets into the show.
And then if I heard accurately from Aaron, you all were actually working on Wesley before Picard thought about having, but you had to do the
Yeah.
consultation thing, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were really sweet and nice, and they're like, we really could like to use him, and we want to. I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, we're not going to say no.
But it was your idea first.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah,
even though it
very
aired
fast.
later, it was yours first. Yeah. Let's see. Mark Flessa asked about the Star Wars to Star Trek transition. So, okay,
Yeah.
Mark,
Yes, I saw that question. Yeah, it was by design.
good,
I think it's
good.
something
Yeah.
that you don't want to like, if you're to open up on diplomacy on a ship, I think kids would turn it off real quick.
Oh, my punster Glenn Iverson says adult Murph will start a talk show and begin using his last name Griffin. Only old people will get that. Let me see if there's any follow-ups here because we're there.
We did have on Troll Hunters, we had a little gnome named Noam Chomsky. I don't know how many kids got that one.
You had to. You had to. Melanie says families that write together fight together. Musical families. Okay, that's Susan Harwood, the quote you were looking for from Bush earlier from W. Too often we judge other groups by their worst examples while judging ourselves by our best intentions.
Yeah, George Bush.
Who knew we'd be quoting, W.
It was a good one. It's a good quote.
Everybody's just praising the show up and down. I'd want to get to, the future here. So let me just see if I can wrap these up real fast.
You got all the time in the world for praise.
Oh, don't say that.
It's not criticism.
We've had some, especially some of the graphics guys, we've gone way too long. Ed Pogue says to anyone that plays video games, I totally recommend checking out the Prodigy video game Supernova.
Yes.
Did you all have involvement with that?
We did. Lisa Schultz Boyd, I know, was our liaison. She was in the writer's room. And so she went after we did season one, she really helped out to kind of justify. I remember they would ask questions. They're like, oh, they find another, what was it? They'd find the starship. Or there are certain things where we couldn't have happen. Where like that would break our plot.
Yeah. Melanie's finishing my question for me. She said, is maybe the reason, I don't know whether you were having species diversity with the Tellarites, even accidentally, or is it a thing where Jankum hasn't gone through Tellarite puberty and maybe tusks are part of maturing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's more.
Yeah, and honestly, we worked off of the Tellurite designs from the original series. So
thank you.
They didn't have tusks.
No,
so.
I'm happy if he stays. I like it because they've shown different ones now.
And I agree, like tusks, would grow with maturity. So
do you see the Blu-rays for season 2 are they're on pre-order, I think.
I think they come out soon in November.
They should be coming out.
Yes.
Right, yeah. And
I wish I had some to give away tonight, but I don't on the
we don't even have any, so
yeah. Oh, Melanie is saying she still thinks Gwen's dad, the diviner, looks a little like Moff Tarkin, and the side and Dreadnought looks like Grievous, but that's just
I can see the Grievous thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's bad.
Mark Flessa says the Voyager A might be my favorite ship design from all of modern Trek.
Wow.
There you go. Um,
I still love the Protostar though. I just it's the Protostar is such a beautiful ship.
it
So
We
was
had in our hand the Playmate product. They had a Protostar, and it would
yeah,
light up, and the
you would hit a
nacelle
button
would
like it was an amazing ship with lights and sounds, and you hit the button
you hear Adele be like, "Go fast!"
and it never got made.
does the did the was the Proto Warp nacelle going to come out?
Yeah,
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 Oh,
it was such
it
a
was
cool
amazing.
toy.
mm, mm, mm.
Ah,
I think we're about down to the end. Am I missing anybody? Nope, that's it. Well, so here we are. It's October 2024. Do we know anything? Is it the longer it goes, the less likely it is that the season three will happen, or is it just completely a crazy
the only
time
thing
in
we
the
know
industry
is
and
from
anything can happen?
those numbers that came out. I think Aaron Walke dove through the Netflix whatever every quarter they drop and they show how many hours things have been watched. So I think, we had some pretty good numbers behind our show, but
But you never know. It's just it's I don't.
yeah, it exactly. It's more than just the numbers, I think. Right? Like if your numbers were astronomical, yes, guaranteed they're gonna, but yeah,
But also, there's a lot of like I don't know, like with Skydance buying
Paramount.
Paramount. I mean, there's a lot of people making
Yeah.
decisions now, and there's like a big waiting period. I think things will be slow moving in terms of decisions for anything in Star Trek in these next couple of years. But we'll
Is
see.
it is that more on you're right. Everything's in such a flux right now. I keep trying to tell everybody to be brave. It's affecting everything from the live
I think it
action
affects
movies
everything because it's kind
all
of
up
like you
and
have
yeah.
new bosses coming in. I mean, and this is all speculative, but it's like you have new bosses coming in and they're going to look at, and they don't really take control for like another year. Like there's this huge interim. It's like they're not coming in boots on the ground going this. I think they're kind of getting a lay of the land, and Star Trek is a big, big trophy, to
For
look at.
me, like when you think about the business side of it, one episode of ours is like roughly 1.7 million to make. And you look at it like one live action episode of television,
Hmm.
and they're spending 15 to 20 million dollars or something. And I'm like, we can't, it just baffles me that like just give us like $10 million and we could make an amazing animated film, and start a film franchise with Prodigy, or it
30
doesn't seem that
Okay,
expensive.
so this was an eternity ago, before the strikes and everything. But you mentioned Brian Robbins earlier, comes out and says when the SpongeBob movie is doing great, but it's also not affecting what they're doing with the daily series, the strip series. It's like it's not like live action where, oh, hello, Shatner Nimoy, this is your reward for doing all that trench work, 16-hour days. But an animated movie, they look at it as just feeding back, and that you still keep pumping out more, right? Episodic.
Yeah.
But he mentioned Prodigy as maybe a successor to we should do this. And then that went away. Whether he
Yeah,
was
I think that I think honestly, I think there's not that big of an audience for kids in Star Trek. I think it's easy for like that they go, oh, Paw Patrol movie? Heck yeah, whatever. Everything are giant things you see on the toy shelf.
the
Kids don't know Star Trek, and it's
this
very,
is
very hard to break into a sci-fi space genre. Um, you
I agree.
know,
I think the toy business is a big factor, and the lack of it that Star Trek has for kids. It doesn't help.
So we're talking about dominoes. We need it back on to convince toy makers who may have had contracts pending until it was yanked, right? That we need more eyeballs to see new stuff to get the toys to elevate to a
But
film movie
it's
level.
an interesting quagmire because it's like, well, if you really want to get the toys, then you need to be writing to a 6-year-old market. And I'm like, Prodigy isn't like I mean, Star Trek, I feel like this is why we were apprehensive also at the beginning. Like, I would not want to see a Star Trek show for 6-year-olds because we didn't want to do little Kirk, little Spock. Maybe that's just our own preference, but we feel like Star Trek deserves
Star Trek babies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Star Trek. Yeah, that's pretty much
yeah. And I think they are doing that right now. I think they're trying to figure out how to do that. But I don't know. I just always kind of aspired Star Trek to be the smart kid show.
Yeah. I meant to mention way early, you mentioned about when you were looking for your writer's room to get a lot of people that did live action writing. You know, she had the help of a writer's strike, but that's exactly what Dorothy did with the original animated series. She had lots of people that had written for the original series. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably
was it tied to the writer's strike that's why?
Well, they were more available. There were more people willing to deal because animation wasn't part of their strike umbrella. Yeah. So a lot of guys who were picketing could come in and do scripts for her, and they were fine. They were not violating anything. But I mean, like David Gerald did his Tribbles show, you know, and nobody was having to change names or anything. There were at least 4 or 5 or 6 original series writers who did scripts for the animated.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, then it was too good for set, you know, kind of like you all.
I always thought those scripts were just like leftover from after the show was canceled that they just wanted to make. So those were made like made to order.
There were 1 or 2 or 3 ideas pitches, but you know, because they had to shrink them down to half hour and they had to simplify them a little bit for animation. But they got to go crazy with the alien. You know, it's like you guys. They got those really? 60s budgets. Yeah. They could blow open their alien landscapes and all of that.
We haven't even talked about Adric tonight, so sorry, Larry. The Aurelians.
Huh?
We didn't get to talk about the Aurelians, the Adric from season 2, which was from the animated.
Yes.
From the animated series, yeah.
Proceed, Governor. Did you want to say something?
No, I think he's my low-key favorite character. I think that's mine.
From your show or from the
our
one
show? From our show. I think Adric is like
Adric
is our Boba Fett.
No, I was gonna say Adric's inspiration was Snake Plissken from Escape from New York.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
That's we're having new insights here. I bet that's never come up in an interview, right?
But that's when you get great characters. You don't just want to like.
He looks like a silly bird, but
he's inspired by Worf. I'm like, no, Worf is Worf. Like, great, you know. Yeah.
Okay. I was trying to find
Dan, are you a freak for Adric?
I'm waiting for
where is that shirt, Kevin? Where is that shirt?
The Adric is landing. We need that one.
I'm a freak for Adric.
Yeah. Oh. So no, we should just sit tight. I mean, you saw obviously they did another banner for bringing back the show.
I think all people can do is enjoy the show, share their love for it, and you know what? Like, time will be kind to it, you know, down the road. It'll have its moment. It just may not be right now.
I know, and we have a lot, like Alex Kurtzman and everyone at CBS loves our show. So there's tremendous support internally. You know.
Yeah. Oh, I know what I meant to. We were talking about the industry and the studios and the fluxiness of Paramount. Are you saying there that if Netflix decides to go on a tear and say, yes, we want a season 3, would it bog down at Paramount, or would somebody manage to sign a contract and let you do it?
It would have to be, I mean, CBS owns Trek. I think it's going to be interesting because it's like Skydance now owns Paramount and John Lasseter really runs the animation at Skydance. So I think it could come down to John Lasseter. What does he want to do with an animated Trek? Does he want to do a new Trek?
do, but Dan, I let's say tomorrow Netflix says, hey, we would love a season 3. CBS would, and Alex Kurtzman, they'd be like, oh,
awesome. They would be like, this is amazing. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, is it Alex's call to make? It's the higher ups, isn't it?
It's the higher ups of Alex. Alex is,
that's what I'm saying. Alex, I'm sure Alex would, of course, Alex would love to do it.
Yeah, but they all love, they're all huge supporters of the show. They really,
Well, and it hasn't exactly been quiet with the I mean, I hated to say it, but it's almost like the first yank from Paramount Plus got more eyeballs on Prodigy than it and part of that was the lovely marketing, and I'm saying that sarcastically. But
You know what? Our show was born in turmoil, and it's lived its whole life in turmoil. It's like, again, it's been like, bought sight unseen. We make it, all of a sudden CBS is involved. Now Paramount's involved. Now as it's on terrestrial television, it was at a time where streamers were going on, and then they're imploding, and like even now Skydance is getting involved. It's like there's been no stability. Then we didn't even talk about COVID. COVID's in there.
yeah.
I'm almost, in regards to a season 3 ever happening, I'm more actually worried just about the business model today for studios. I think that's probably,
I
do
wanted
we
to
have
ask
the
you that,
numbers? I bet we have the numbers, but I don't
especially
know if that's
post
enough.
strikes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Netflix right now they make a lot, and then when you have that one or two things that really blow up, then they really hunker down on Stranger Things or Squid Game or whatever. If you're a success, I don't know if that's enough, and I don't see them continuing a lot of shows into season 3s, 4s, and 5s. It's almost
But it
Right.
could also come down
unicorn.
to like Netflix going, we want a space show. And they're like, well, we have Star Trek Prodigy. They go, well, that's perfect. Let's do another Star Trek. It's like, it's whims. And the industry is like moved by whims of the
Yeah.
right place at the right time, the right opportunity.
Yep.
Um, you know,
Yep.
So having said that, if tomorrow they said this or 6 months from now and you get a green light to do a season 3, how hard would it be to get the band back together? Or would you be having a lot of new people moved on to other things? And I know Ben's doing another series somewhere, but
I
I
think,
mean,
it's hard in the sense that everyone's locked down in different shows and films now, but I don't think it's hard to bring back a lot of our people in some capacity. Maybe Ben can't come back as the full director, but he can help, you know, mentor, or what do you call it? Help be an
refine.
expert on it, be uh,
consulting director
yeah,
thing.
exactly, exactly. I know a lot of our core people. This is a very special project to all of us that, you know.
Yeah. Okay, last question, then I will let you go. And I forgot to do this earlier. And I think someone also asked about this or mentioned it. The most disappointing thing for the both seasons is
Uh-oh.
Is this how we're
I was excited to see the little baby. I'm going to call her Acacian,
Okay.
and then you
oh,
brought her back for the overthrow. I
oh,
and then she didn't pay off anywhere. Are we gonna, if you had a third season, what somebody Ed Pogue asked this, if you had a third season, what would you do? Do you have story ideas ready to go?
well, on the
But
Cation
before I'll
thing,
let you
Lisa
answer that,
Schultz,
but I want to know about the little Cation girl.
the
Not
Cation
the
child. I
Haitian girl.
remember after season one, there was talk. Lisa Schultz Boy wanted to do like a podcast of like the stories of what's going on that ship, like as a side thing. But we kind of felt like
Who did?
Lisa Schultz Boyd, who also
Oh,
helped out with the video game, she wanted to kind of like take that and
Do a
run.
little spin-off, yeah,
mhm.
A
podcast.
little cute cat felt like it was too cute for the show. It felt like it aged it down. So we were like, let's get her off.
Okay, but to our defense, when you're making this a show like this, you might see a design, but you're like, "Oh, that's cute," and like you never know what people are gonna react to. I'm amazed that people still talk about the cat. Like, I
Well, she had FaceTime, and then you came back to her at the end of that
it doesn't
season when
even
they yeah.
talk. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
no, but
surprised
Kevin,
people are.
we needed a face of the miners, and she was the face of the miners. We're like, we need to care about the miners. Who's the person we're going to care for? We're like a cute little cat, little cute little
Wait,
cat.
so for people who've ever heard of the screenwriting book,
Like the cat.
Save the Cat, it's sort of this famous trope of a hero or someone you might not like, but when they save the cat, you like them, right? John Wick, oh, his dog died. He's gonna go kill everyone in the city to avenge his dog. Okay, I like this assassin now because he loved his dog, right? And so for us, we're like, why do you like Gwen, the daughter of the villain? How do we get people to like her? She literally saves the cat in our pilot, which I think is really clever and funny.
Well, I think more FaceTime could totally you could rough her up a little bit and make her acceptable.
Yeah.
I was excited to see a Cation and maybe a kid Cation and all of that.
I think, if we ever had a season 3, I think she'd be
She can be
fun.
wild. We always talked about like she is like
Girl,
she turns into like a Blackbeard, like a
girl,
pirate.
pirate. Yeah,
I
yeah.
I lied. One more thing, industry. Is tag ever going to be able to be merged into the regular Writers Guild?
It's
I
no,
wish.
because
The
there's so
writers, the
many.
writers of tag.
That's a
Wish.
massive quagmire where unions can't poach other union people from other. So there's like this legal thing that like WGA cannot get involved.
But every writer, of course, wants to,
Wants to, right?
Every
yeah.
writer wants to be WGA in
We
animation.
get just yesterday, we got residuals for a live action movie called Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And it's a horror film, and so it comes out every Halloween time. Streamers love to stream it, and we get a little chunk of money, which helps keep us afloat. In animation, there's none of that. We don't get to
Yeah.
see anything from the fruits of our franchises that we help.
Well, and the Animation Guild tag has artists, and it's not just writers. So it's just like
No, it's
breaking.
mostly no, and they
Mostly
mostly
artists.
protect. It's all the artists. That's mostly
Mhm.
who they have, and they need to rightfully protect the majority of their body of their union. So I get it. Feature animated animation writers, there's not many of us. There might be like 50 of us. Is the entire tag union gonna strike for us? I don't expect them to.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a complicated matter.
Oh well. Well, welcome to 2024. Anyway, guys, listen, thank you. You've gone way over time with us, and I appreciate it. This is awesome. I hadn't done a real sit down with you, and this was 90% of what I would have done in a sit down with an audience. So,
Well, this is great. Thank you everybody for
Yeah.
staying up with us.
Yeah,
so
thank you
oh,
for
go
just
ahead.
loving the show, and I just appreciate you hearing all of our nonsense and all of our little trivia things that we're sharing or background facts. Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys another time, maybe at another
Season 3 someday. All right, guys.
Okay,
Good
guys.
night.
Thanks
Love
so
you.
much.